And live. All right. I'm going to try not to swear like a sailor. This is how many of you guys are here because you have a stressed out dog at home? A few of you. How many of you guys know somebody who has a reactive dog or a dog that's a little bit distressed? And how many of you guys are just here for funsies because it's a Tuesday night and we're fun? Yay! Y'all can't see it. Everybody's hand went up. All right, so my name is Melissa McCue-McGrath. I'm one of the trainers here at AWS, and prior to living here, I was in Boston for 20 years doing serious behavior consultations, and a lot of them had to do with dogs that were not coping well in the city, but stress is stress is stress. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what stress is, the good and the bad and the ugly, and the fun of stress, and hopefully some ways that you guys can start thinking like a dog trainer when we are consulting with you guys with stressed out dogs or distressed dogs. The first, there we go. I've got two things going on. My notes are here and the presentation's up there. So how many of you guys had to ever write papers for college? And then you had to do like I need to fill a little bit, so we're going to use the Merriam-Webster dictionary thing at the head. So we're going to do the same thing here today too. So in this case, emotional stress is a strain from an adverse or demanding circumstance. So like in the event of having to write a paper and needing to fill out an extra couple of sentences or pages. The physics, it's a force of pressure on a material object. That is stress. And from biology, it's a change that takes the body or the mind out of its comfort zone or normal homeostasis place. We are going to be functionally using two of those. We're not really going to get into physics tonight. I am not a physicologist. But there are two kinds of stress that we're going to be kind of defining and working with today, distress and eustress. Distress is the bad stress, the one that like we all think of when we say, are you stressed? Yes! Like your shoulders are up to here, your eyes are bugging out. Colloquially, though, eustress is considered the good stress. So if you get a new puppy, you're excited, or if there's a new baby on the way, like there's an excitement to it as well that's very good. Your dog, when they're going to the park, they're pulling, they're excited to go to the park. That is also a form of stress. So not all stress is bad. It can also explain happy anticipation. When I work with dogs, or when Roberta works with dogs, or when Kim over here works with dogs, we are often dealing with dogs in a state of distress or eustress. They're either really amped up, happy, or really amped up, not so happy. And because they both start with a kick of adrenaline, that adrenaline response starts in the dog, and they're like, oh boy, I'm going to go to the park, or oh God, something bad is going to happen to me. If you can catch the dog at that point where that adrenaline starts to kick in, and you can make that dog happy, and you can start to control and give the dog predictable things when they're happy, like find it, you can use it when they're distressed, because they're still operating under the threshold of that adrenaline response, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But first I want to ask you guys, yeah, you guys didn't see that while I was talking about it, did you? Well, there's that. I want to see what the first thing is that you guys notice about this picture. How many of you guys noticed the happy Rottweiler getting ready to play? How many of you guys noticed the little stressed out dog? The trainers all did, and the people who have reactive dogs. Yeah. And how many of you guys noticed all the people on the beach in the back? So the reason I like to bring this up is because of this. One person's distress is another person's eustress. So I, as a dog trainer who work with reactive dogs, when I see this and hear somebody yelling, he's friendly, this is nightmare fuel to me and most of my students. But to many people, this is the cutest, funnest, best day ever. So just when you're looking at a specific event, it might be very distressing to someone or very happy-inducing to somebody else. So the perspective matters in cases like these. So an enthusiastic owner might be saying, he's friendly, the dog is going, wee, the dog is having the time of his life. A stranger, I don't want to get muddy paws on me just before this interview. Or maybe there's a kid that's like, I was attacked by the family dog and I am very scared. So there's a whole range of emotion that could be in response to this coming at them. There we go. So when we're dealing with reactivity, what we're really looking at as trainers is whose stress is it that we're talking about. Demonstration of distress looks differently based on the organism. And we all know that growling, barking, lunging, those are all pretty obvious signs of distress, right? We can pretty much agree on that. But in my line of work, my job is not as black and as white as growling, barking, lunging. I'm looking at other things as well to hopefully help me prepare that dog so that way they don't have to get up to growl, lunge, and bite to get distance or to be heard, that they're scared, that they're distressed. In many cases, when a dog has bitten a kid, the owners report that the dog's tail was wagging at the time of the bite. So you have to look at the whole dog. You can't just look at little pieces of it either. And here's some picture that I really, really like because I do think it is a funny picture. The dog trainers in this room might be seeing something a little bit differently than most of the other people in this room, but it says Happy Summer. It's my dog, Captain Love. Yes, that's his real name. And his friend Charlie. What's going on behind us is a basketball game at a park, and Captain was only with us for a few months at this point, so he was not really yet acclimated to the spring of Boston when we took this photo. Some people laugh at this, and I laugh at it too because it says Happy Summer, and he's got a huge erection. Very happy summer indeed, but he is also very stressed out. His eyes are really wide. His eyebrows are up almost like to his forehead, like he just had Botox. His ears are pretty low set, and usually if you see him, his ears, when he's in a more neutral state, you can see him right behind you. That's him when he's not stressed out. His ears are little triangles. Actually, let me grab that photo. I think we've got one here, right? Oh, no, I was looking for the poster. Oh, here it is, like that. So his ears are usually down and facing forward when he's in a more neutral state. But here, they're pinned back. So even though he has floppy ears, you can see the base of his ears are facing the wrong way. He's panting like he just ran a marathon. It is 45 degrees outside. And he has what my students call lip sticking, which was a fun term to learn. That is not the technical term that we use. He has an erection, but I thought lip sticking was pretty funny. So we've all met these dogs that stress up. In no way was he going to be aggressive in this case. It's just that there was a new stimulus in his environment. He's like, oh my God, this is the best day ever. And he just got overwhelmed. He stresses up, I stress up. We've all met those people. But some animals stress down. They get smaller, and they may not be at risk of biting anybody because they're distressed, but they do get smaller, they cower, they become more quiet. Meanwhile, Charlie, that other dog, is just chilling in the back like, what kids? And I want you guys also, before we get into the meat of this, to understand that stress is a spectrum, and homeostasis is pretty much what we're going for. With just looking at broad strokes, what you need to know going in, the abbreviated version. Distress, bad stress, we've covered that. Eustress, good stress, we've covered that. Homeostasis is just right. So if you think of the three little bears, too hot, too cold, just right? So we're looking for just right, and we're trying to get the dogs closer to that just right as we can. Now, we don't want them to be robots and only be there, right? Because life isn't fun if there's no joy, right? But we need them to be able to not stay elevated. We're going to talk about the importance of that in a minute. Another important thing to notice before we get into the meat of this is trauma does not equal distress. Distress you can bounce back from. If you had a bad day, you spilled a cup of coffee, you might have a bad day for the rest of the day, but tomorrow's a new one. But trauma you can't bounce back from. And sometimes we'll see dogs that are more traumatized in our classes and in our private sessions and in our day-to-day lives. And this takes a lot more work, and it's worth it. But colloquially, we tend to interchange distress and trauma, I think, a little bit more frequently. So I think it's useful to think of these as two different states entirely. In fact, there is a study that was titled Labels Matter. Is it stress or is it trauma? It was published in Translational Psychiatry, and I'm going to give a long quote. And they say, here we propose to conceptually associate the term stress and stressful experience with stress resilience. So we want to start thinking of stress as resilience and building resilience instead of like, this is stressful. Trauma should only be used in reference to exposures that lead to pathology. So it's something that they can't bounce back from, or that it's really hard for them to get out of that headspace. So that's something to consider too. And as I mentioned before, adrenaline kicks off that process of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. There are 4 Fs. You usually only hear fight or flight, sometimes freeze, but fawn is the 4th. So if somebody came to my front door, and this is, okay, I'm gonna guess about 80 to 90% of the room is gonna get this reference, Ed McMahon. He was a guy, it was the 80s, he used to bring checks to your front door for like $1 million. Oh, that was $3 million. Lucky. So he would bring a check to your door. So when you would hear ding dong, you would open the door, kick of adrenaline. What do I do with this information? Yay, I won $3 million. But if you hear ding dong and you see this guy, that's probably, you're gonna get a very different response, unless you're into some really weird things. So we want to start thinking of this as more of a spectrum, and once that adrenaline kicks, what do? But there are 2 others. Freeze, which is what I sometimes do, just kind of stand there like, oh God, also swearing like a sailor, but that's the 5th F. Like, and then fawn, which I'm sure we all know this person too. Oh, let me help you. I'm sorry. A lot of appeasement and just trying to cope in the moment by just trying to be helpful, helping, not helping sometimes. But that fawning aspect is also part of the 4 Fs that we're going to be talking about. In my line of work, fine is a 4-letter word because I wouldn't be in your living room if things weren't fine, like helping your dog. We all know that growling, barking, lunging, hackles up, those are all bad signs. But some dogs, as I mentioned before, don't present with typical stress signals, and we have to understand, the owner has to understand what their dog is saying as an individual. Captain, we mentioned before, gets bigger, bouncier, stresses up. This is an example of a dog stressing down. But because you may also see unlikely or unusual signs of distress displacement as well. One of the more stressed out, distressed dogs that I've ever worked with was a serial humper. And it was funny if you just saw it the first time, but he just kept doing it. And if this dog was biting or growling instead, in addition to the blacked out eyes, because his pupils would dilate, his ears would go back, he would get really stiff, his face would go hard, and then he would just lunge out, muck on, and instead of biting, he would just go to town on your leg. Your leg would be bruised. Like this wasn't a good time for him or for the person who was getting the receiving end of his distress. And that was a very distressed dog. And when you're not looking at that as a typical displacement behavior for stress, you might miss that and be like, oh, there he goes, like it's Humpy McGee again. But if you're looking at the context and you're looking at the whole dog, you might actually recognize that some of these displacement signals, that would be an example of fawn, in that he was kind of using a displacement behavior in place of a more traditional behavior of stress displacement. This is a dog on Pet Finder. They're using this photo to get this dog into the right home. They're appealing to your emotional, like, oh, that poor dog, because she does look pretty pitiful. Like, I'm small, I need a home. You can picture Sarah McLachlan singing over this. But as trainers, we would look at this and say, oh, that dog's a little, I don't know, I want to work with that dog for a few minutes, see how she warms up. I have a lot more questions to ask if somebody were to just go and get this dog out of a shelter. And honestly, the same with this bozo, too, in the middle. And then at Christmas time, every dog trainer gets Christmas cards. This is actually from Home Depot. I didn't know when they got in the pajama game, but they were selling family pajamas, including the dog. Look at all the people. Look how happy they are. What do you see here? He is not feeling it. Maybe he's Jewish, I don't know, like he just doesn't want to be here. You've got all of these people having a good time, and they are completely missing the point that this dog is really unhappy. And then they use this to sell Christmas pajamas. We humans are terrible at reading dogs, but distress can also be really good. It can save our lives. It can save our animals. It gives us an opportunity to run if we hear a loud noise, right? If you startle at something out of the corner of your eye, it could be a snake. Or, oh no, it's a paper bag, and then you laugh it off. That laugh after something like that is just the release of all of that adrenaline that's built up. It's your release. It's basically a valve that you're just letting it out. And our dogs do that too. After you see dogs go, rah, 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 and the horse you rode in on, they'll walk 10 paces, shake, and then walk on. That is, I want you guys to start looking for that in your dogs. After there's a stressful event, about 10 paces, you'll see a shake. That's us laughing. That's kind of shaking it off. In some cases, distress might also need to be part of their management plan. So in this case, there's a baby gate. He looks like Scotch. I'm sorry. I would have picked a different photo if I didn't think that you were coming. But he's in the middle. He's not exactly thrilled with this, right? But let's say this baby gate there might be a baby on the other side that could get trampled. So you're doing the cost-benefit analysis. Do I make my dog a little unhappy, or do I constantly watch this dog with a crawling infant on the ground? Or maybe there's a locksmith working on the front door and you don't want your dogs to run out into the street. So distress, you can be a little mopey, you'll live. So this talk isn't about making sure that our dogs never experience a distressing thing ever. They're going to. They live in this world. But do they have resilience? Can they bounce back from this? Pretty sure they're going to be fine. But as behavior people and as dog trainers, we're constantly doing this like math behavior jujitsu of how much stress do I really want to put on this dog, distress or eustress, and how much can I relieve? And it's constantly trying to do this equation, trying to make sure that in general we're doing net good for the dog in front of us. And anticipation is a form of stress too. How many of you guys, you guys know this, right? Throw the ball. Throw the ball. And so whether we're getting ready to play, to work, or like me, oh my God, dessert! We are ready for action in that moment. And that action may not always be run away, but play prepares us for when something does happen, that we know how to react. So play is a big part of learning how to cope when we're stressed out or distressed. For working dogs like police dogs, they are under a lot of distress by way of their job. They're put in very loud situations, very chaotic situations. They don't usually wiggle their little booties and be like, hey, bad guy, come with me. That's not usually how they do it, although it would be great if they did. But not all stress is horrible, no good, very bad, end of the world stress. It can be adaptive. So when we look at the effects of stress on a dog or on us, because this is also applicable to us as well, all mammals, I had several slides of this initially, but I figured you guys wanted to get out of here. And 30 slides of bad things that happen when you're stressed out seemed a little excessive. So we just kind of came down a little bit. So let's generalize and say that STS, short-term stress, that is usually adaptive, right? So it can boost our immune response, increase oxygen to our muscles so we can run if we need to, quick decision-making, increased energy, cortisol. And then LTS is long-term stress, so days, weeks, or months of prolonged stress, and that's where we start to get into trouble. Chronic stress is experiencing stressors over a prolonged period of time, according to the American Psychological Association. It can result in long-term drains on the body, as the autonomic nervous system continues to trigger physical reactions over time. It causes wear and tear on your body. It's not so much what chronic stress does to the nervous system, but what continuous activation of the nervous system does to other bodily systems that becomes problematic. So it's not so much that like you're a little bit stressed for a little bit of time. It's this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Hi, 2020. We were all there. It was just the constant onslaught of bad, 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 and some would argue is still happening today. Continued to be continued. So I limited it to 2 slides, but you can experience chronic fatigue, decline in testosterone, libido, irregular heartbeats, irregular periods, bacterial infections are on the increase. All of this stuff happens when your immune system is down due to prolonged stress. So, to our dogs. My dog sometimes barks at things. This white line here is called the stress threshold. If you've ever done a behavior consultation with me, you've seen this a lot. That's the point where the dog is barking, lunging, growling, really struggling. You can learn, or the dog can learn, below this point, usually. The closer they get to that threshold, the harder it is for them to learn. Once they're over it, they're done. So let's say your dog sees a cat, and a few minutes goes by, and then there's a motorcycle. This is stress hormone. It's starting to decrease after the initial event with the cat. It starts to come down. It doesn't get back down to 0 before the motorcycle goes. And that's what sets the dog off. It's not that the dog doesn't like motorcycles. It's that the dog had 2 events in rapid succession, 2 minor events. So if your dog sometimes barks at things, but not always, this might be part of it. It might not be the thing that they're barking at. My dog sometimes barks at dogs, but not always. Well, maybe they saw a cat 6 seconds before, and it's the cat that set the dog off, not the thing that they're barking at. And then they see a little boy, and that poor kid, he's getting barked at today. So this is called trigger stacking. And this, if you have ever had a day, I know we all have, like, I dropped my keys, I forgot my coffee, I hit a pothole and got a flat tire, and I finally got to work, and my boss goes, somebody get a case of the Mondays. Just want to deck him. And if you do, you're over threshold and also probably arrested for a felony. But again, keeping in mind that these hormones should drop off over time. But not all stresses are created equally. Your dog always barks at one thing consistently. That is a huge trigger for that animal. So every time they see a cat, they're going over the threshold. And then anything that happens after, the dog is like Dino from the Flintstones. This is harder, but it's more predictable. This is usually when people are calling us to help, when it's always happening. We can actually do better work here. But it becomes more of a problem, and it's easier for the owners, I think, to see when it's always happening under one thing. This is not good. This is chronic stress. I was really struggling with my art program, so I didn't get all of the little black lines showing that it's decreasing, but you get the idea. So here, cat, motorcycle, kid, then I guess they should just move because they live near a cat colony. But this is a dog that can never come down. The catalyst in this, pun intended, was the cat. And it's here where we may recommend seeing a veterinary behaviorist or somebody who's really good in animal behavior, who has qualifying credentials, not some guy on the internet that says, I'm a behavioralist. Behavioralist is a political science term, not a dog training term, so that should be your first red flag to not see that person. A board-certified veterinarian who works in behavior cases is a veterinary behaviorist. There are only 80 in the entire world, which is why you have to wait 5 months now to see them. They're busy. If you have a very big problem, this is the right person to see, but maybe in the interim work with somebody who's adept in behavior. We can certainly try to help or get you to the right person. If we're not it, we will happily say if we are not the right fit. If a dog is here, this can be life or death, because when they are this stressed out, their whole bodies are changed. Like, they're tight, they're stressed, they're in those states of chronic stress that I had on the slides before. Their health decreases, and they have a very short fuse. It takes very little to set them off. They're constantly snapping or just, I can't handle this. They're not having a good time. And remember, it's not so much what chronic stress does to the nervous system, but what continuous activation of the nervous system does to other bodily systems that become problematic. Continuous activation, continuous activation, continuous activation. These were the dogs that I worked with in Boston, because so many of them were sound phobic or afraid of people, and they lived with millions of people, and they, garbage trucks, people walking upstairs past their doors. This was my client load for 20 years. This is very difficult, and you almost always go to drugs quickly when you see this. So we have to find a way to minimize stress. Here we go. So if you're in a position where your dog is a little bit distressed, there are things that we are probably likely going to tell you if you come to see us for behavior. And the first is, when you're working with a dog who's approaching threshold, you have to have a training plan that considers all of these. Look where training is on this list. Right? It's not number one. And I'm a trainer, so you can trust me. If it were up to me, I'd put that number one. But truthfully, for the welfare of the dog, we have to look at all of this other stuff first. I think I'm a pretty decent dog trainer. I cannot train Lyme disease out of your dog. So if you see a quick behavior problem, a sudden behavior change, something that is different in your dog, and your professional does not say go see a vet first, find another professional. The very first thing you have to do with a quick behavior change is see a vet. You might have hearing loss, you might have a thyroid disorder, you might have pain somewhere in the body, you might have some of my clients, my border collie, when her behavior changed, it was Lyme disease, and we didn't know for months because I was treating behavior, not her physical symptoms that we didn't know existed until after she got a vet check. Management. When you are not actively training, you manage the behavior you want to get while you're training the behavior you need. What I mean by that is, your dog is continuing to run away and you're trying to do come when called, manage it. There are these wonderful tools out there called leashes. They have them, they come in really long, they come in 30 feet. If you can get your dog to come at 30 feet, get another one. See if you can get your dog to come at 60. If they can't, don't let your dog off the leash until they can consistently come back at 60 feet. Once you're at 60 feet, you could probably let them go. Your job here is done. But for the most part, like, if you have a problem, there's got to be a way that you can manage it at a lower level so your dog can learn this skill and then start to push that boundary out. Mental stimulation. You have to work the brain. Most people think exercise is the first important thing. If you have a dog with anxiety and you are getting it tired and it's still coming back kind of hyper, that's not energy, that's anxiety, and you can't exercise out anxiety. It can help. It can certainly help with a training plan, but more exercise is actually going to build endurance. And the last thing you need is an anxious Weimaraner who can run a marathon. So instead of thinking of exercise as the number one thing, think of mental stimulation. Training, puzzle toys, problem solving, impulse control. These are all things that we would consider mental stimulation. Taking your dog for a sniffy walk, putting them on that long line, and just let them sniff in the woods. That is mental stimulation to your dog. It might be boring as hell to you, but your dog can sniff 40 feet under your feet. That's 4 basketball nets straight down. They can smell everything, and it is the equivalent of us walking at night into Times Square and getting a visual, overstimulating experience. Hopefully without like the wonky mascots that they have. But for your dog, like that's like reading Tolstoy. So just letting them sniff and checking out their environment instead of saying, come on, we're walking, that can help them out too, and that can help decompress them so that way they can cope. Then exercise, an appropriate amount of physical exercise for the dog in front of you. And then training, short bursts of training while you're working. So, does that go? Okay. And if you've ever taken one of my classes, you hear this a lot. I usually have it on the board, the 4Ds. Some trainers call it the 3. I go with 4. I'm an overachiever, what can I say? The goal is always to keep the dog below threshold so they can learn. Cool, we can agree on that. But once you're in training mode, think of these Ds. So when students in my class say, but he knows it at home, I believe you. I 100% believe you, but then you go outside and then what happens? Distractions, right? So, distance. How close is my dog to the thing that he's probably going to ignore me over? There's a squirrel, and Captain is 30 feet from me, but he's 5 feet from that squirrel. Is he likely to come back to me? We've been working really hard. He might. That's why we're still on a long line. But if he's 5 feet from me and 30 feet from a squirrel, I'm more likely to get him to be able to work. And how can I tell if he can work? Can he do a touch? Can he do a sit? Can he respond to his name? If he can respond to his name and do a couple of simple behaviors, I know he's way under threshold, and then I can start to push him a little further. If I say his name and he's like, huh, and he knows that I'm there, but he's not really paying attention, he is too close. So I need to find a way to pull him back from that distraction. That thing that has his attention. Distractions, what's in the environment? And it might be something that we can't see. As I mentioned before, they can smell really well, so we may not see that distraction, but they know it's there. One quick note on this, my dog, while we were still in the city, found our neighbors, he was diabetic. We're going on our nighttime walk, and my dog dove under this guy's car, which was not a behavior he had ever done. Just dove under his car. I'm like, buddy, somebody's watching. This is going to look really suspicious. So I'm trying to pull my dog out from underneath this car, and he came out with a medical bag. It was the guy's insulin. So I went and I knocked on the door, and I'm like, oh, what's this? And he's like, oh, I would have gone to the hospital tonight if your dog didn't find this. He was distracted, and it actually helped someone. That's not normal. He is not a trained medical dog. But in this one case, I like to give the happy stories. His distraction did a good thing, so I'll take it. But that just goes to show you that they can perceive things that we can't. I don't know why he alerted on that and decided to pull it out. I will never know. But duration, how long am I asking for the behavior? How long am I asking for my dog to look at me? Let's make it creepy. Right? That's a long time. If he just looks at me real quick, cool, we're done. Am I asking him to sit and stay for 5 seconds? That's normal. Sit and stay for 3 minutes while I leave and then come back? That's just mean. So how long am I asking them to do the behavior? Yes, my dog can sit pretty much anywhere in this classroom. But if I ask him to sit and stay for 10 seconds in a vet office, that is going to be a lot harder than sit and stay in this classroom where he's been practicing it a lot. Or sit and stay at a dog park. Forget it. It's not going to happen. And then difficulty. This is the one that most people don't talk about, the emotional and physical ability of the dog to be able to do the thing. If a dog has arthritis, I'm not going to ask it to sit pretty. If a dog is really stressed out, I'm not going to try to get it to do anything because he won't be able to hear me. So if I'm working with a dog who's under duress, but they're still functioning, they're still bouncing back, I'm turning the volume up on only one of these at a time to train the behavior I want, while I turn the volume down on everything else. So if I want to start getting Captain to listen to me better while he's closer to a squirrel and I'm further away, I'm making sure that there are fewer distractions in my environment, that he's physically and emotionally able to hear me, that we didn't just have like a fireworks show the night before and he's really amped. And I'm not going to do it for an hour. I'm going to do it maybe once or twice, and then, good, we're done. So pick one to work on. How many of you guys have seen this? The ladder of aggression, yeah. I hate that name. I really hate the name ladder of aggression, but it's not up to me. This was created in a behavior manual, so they get paid more than I do. So I'll let them have it. But honestly, the ladder of aggression, they call it that because of the last 3 rungs on this ladder. But blinking, yawning, and licking their nose, like, I just think of this as stress, distress. I don't think of this necessarily as aggression, because I don't think most dogs are aggressive, even if they look it. They're usually scared. So maybe we should call this the ladder of good God, please help your dog. So if a dog is growling every time a kid comes near it, or is lunging and snapping and biting each time a dog goes by, more often than not, we have missed all of these other signs down here. We get called when the dog is growling, lunging, and biting, which means that dog is doing its best to tell you, I'm at the end of my rope, and I've been here for a long time. There are 11 rungs on this ladder. The last 3 are the ones that we get called on. So the other 8, turning body away, sitting, pawing, like the paw is up here. That's something that we're constantly looking for as trainers. Turning the head away from something. Blinking, yawning, and licking their nose is another one. Lip licks are a big one. And if you gave your dog peanut butter, that's explainable. But like if you didn't, and they're just sitting there and you see like little lip flicks against their nose. Trying to walk away from something, and then we're like, no, he's friendly. Throw him right back in. Creeping with their ears back, standing, crouched, tucking their tail under, stiffening, staring, then growl, lunge, and bite. I always tell my students, again, fine is a 4-letter word. If I hear that it's fine, I have a lot more questions to ask, because unless I hear, oh, they're great, then cool. But if they're like, oh, he's fine, it usually tells me that the owner, in their heart of hearts, knows that something's not quite right, but they just might not have the language to explain it. And that's because I think they understand that this might not be great, but he's fine because he hasn't bitten anyone yet. But that shouldn't be the barometer. So we can still do a lot to help those dogs that are up at growl, lunge, bite. Again, working with the distance, duration, distractions, like we can do a lot there. But if a dog is in chronic stress, as I had showed before, I love drugs. Drugs don't make the triggers smaller. It raises the stress threshold up. So now I have more time to help that dog. So when we talk about behavior modification medication, and we don't advocate for it for every case, but for dogs who were up always and couldn't ever come down, that gives us an opportunity to help that dog figure out something close to homeostasis so we can work with it. If I recommend these only if I am controlling for all of the other Ds and the dog is not improving. Or if it's an impossible situation where the dog is completely under chronic stress, can't cope, can't learn, can't get a foothold, so that's where my 5th D, drugs, comes in. And if you're not also training your dog and teaching them how to cope, trying to build that stress resiliency while they're here, this just becomes an expensive Band-Aid, because then these triggers will get bigger, and you need to raise that up again. So when we recommend behavior modification medication, You need to have a training plan in place. It's just like human psychology as well, and psychiatry. That if you're not doing the work and you're just medicating, you're not going to get better. You have to, it's a double-pronged approach that you need your vet and a qualified behavior person, unless that qualified behavior person is a board-certified vet behaviorist. In that case, one-stop shopping. But otherwise, you're more likely working with a trainer who's qualified in behavior and a vet who's curious about behavior, who's trying to help fill some of the gaps because those 80 people are very, very busy in the vet behavior world. The biggest thing we can do to help our distressed pets is learn what stress looks like and to help them in that learning zone that I just talked about, that space underneath that threshold where they're reacting, and hopefully learn how to cope with that stimuli. So let's have a look as to what that looks like. I don't want you guys to think of this as a trick question. How many of you guys think that he's really happy right here? It's not a trick question, I promise. Like, I feel like this is a trick. How many of you guys think that he's stressed out? How many of you guys say it's really hard to tell? It should be hard to tell. Yeah. This is Captain again. This is usually my first indication that he's approaching stress threshold. This is called his commissures. We help him too. It's this. Hey, I'm smiling. If there's a difference between I'm smiling because I'm happy and I'm smiling because some creeper standing right here and I don't like it. Like sitting on a subway by myself and there you are. For me, when those start to pull back on him, I'm like, he's getting closer to that stress threshold. And I'm lucky because he's half hound, so he has jowls. You might not see that in a pug. So again, know your dog and what their stress signals are. You might not also be able to tell with just an image. I'm going to first talk about this and then show you a video that was pulled from. So learning basic body language, how many of you guys have seen posters like this? Awesome. We have one right there. My friend Lily Chin makes these, and in my estimation, she has saved millions of dogs by her artwork. I can't do my job unless somebody makes it relatable, and she has made it relatable for dog trainers all over the world. She used to be an illustrator for the WB, and then her dog ended up with some serious behavior problems, realized that there was no way that she could understand it, so she started making these. And she's been a godsend. She has a book out called Doggy Language. I highly recommend it, but I'm going to warn you, once you see signs of distress in your dog, you can't unsee it. So every time you go down the street, you're going to be like, that dog's unhappy, that dog's, oh, that one's fine. Oh, it's a golden retriever, of course it's fine. Like, you'll see people walking their dogs and pulling them as they're walking the dogs. I just really want to sniff that tree. Like, you're going to see things. Once you see stress, you can't unsee it. So there's your blanket warning. I'm just a buzzkill. So I actually had to pay a friend of mine to take my dog to the dog park because, like, most trainers don't advocate for dog parks. Of course, I had the nerd who really actively liked them for a while, but every time I would go, I would get so stressed out. I'm like, that dog doesn't want to be here. That dog doesn't want to be here. That one's going to bite someone. Oh, there he goes. He bit someone. And like, so I was like, I'm fine. Watching all these other dogs who were also like, I'm fine. And then my nerd of a dog's like, it's a party. And he'd find like a friend. It would just be him and some other bonehead pit bull, like running back and forth, having the time of their life. So I had to pay a friend of mine to take my dog to the dog park because I couldn't go to the dog park with my dog. And then when he started not having fun, because you know what? We outgrow the things that we liked as children. When was the last time you guys were on a slide at the kid park sober? Like, probably been a minute. So we outgrow the things that we enjoyed when we were younger. The same happens for most of our dogs. The dogs who might like the dog park for a while might outgrow it, and that's fine, that's normal. So learning about dog language, you will then see, again, there was a lot of context here that you didn't get by just looking at that picture. So it's really important to not just look at a picture and be like, that dog's stressed out, because it just might be like, we've all had a photo taken of us where it's like in between facial expressions, and it's just like, where we might not look our best, or we just might be like resting bitch face or something, but we're actually having a great time. you need a lot more context. And here's some of that context. It's about 55 degrees out this day. It's not hot. He's panting and the temperature's low. His commissures are back. His ears, even here, they're not forward like they are in that picture. Like the flaps are kind of forward, but if you look up there, they're kind of pulled back a little bit. And short, shallow breaths and hypervigilance that you will see here in a second when I pull up this video. So maybe, oh, it's not a touchscreen. Hold on. The context of this, there we go. I got it. Left. So you've got Captain, the context of this, we have chickens and he has a bird murder on his rap sheet. There are 4 baby chickens about 60 feet from us, and about 40 feet behind that is a swimming pool. We had just started working with the chickens. My kid saw that I was outside. She grabbed her friend and jumped in the pool. I was not expecting them to jump in the pool. I was actually trying to take this video to show my students about desensitization in the 4Ds. And then they added another big distraction on top of it. This is Captain right after they jumped in the pool. I do not advocate for keeping a dog at the stress threshold as I am doing here. I did it for about 1.5 minutes so I could use it as a demonstration purpose, and then I got him out of there. About 4 days later was when I felt that we could try the chickens again. And I tried him another like 60 feet back, so we were about 120 feet from the chickens. Now he can run up to them, and he's good as long as the fence is up. And he play bows to them. It's very cute. But this was while we were still in training. So see if you notice any of the ones that I just talked about. See how stiff he is? There's that foot, this foot he's trying to like, remember I said like 1 foot up? He's got all of his weight on one side so he could spring up. Whimpering, very vigilant. I'm trying to say his name, Captain. He can't pay attention. I'm trying to demonstrate I'm standing on the leash to control distance. I don't want to crank him down with the leash. I want him to make the choice to make it lighter. I should have given him another couple inches. But this is hypervigilance, lip licking, lip lick. And now he's finally able to kind of offer me attention, and now he's getting fed for that. But this is a lot for him. But he's not really paying attention to me. He is choosing to look, but his attention is really at the chickens right there. So, poor buddy. So, poor bud. Let's just, well, let me go here. Yay. How else can we help our dogs? Consent, consent, consent. We have the 4Ds. We've got body language. When we look at the whole dog and can understand what stress looks like in that individual, and it might not look the same for your dog, but there's no shame in walking away. I love dogs. Your dog is lip licking and walking back. That's not the time to say, oh, it's fine. Say, oh, you know what? We got somewhere to go. I think it might have been one of your classes. I don't know. I used to teach a reactive dogs class, and it was a loose leash walking in the city reactive dogs edition. 4 dogs, highly reactive dogs, very narrow sidewalk in the densest populated city in all of New England. And no big deal. So the first thing I teach them is to advocate for their dogs. Like, have something that you can say when somebody like gets that look in their eye. Can I say hi? So have that thing ready to say. And so we go out the front door. They had been practicing their how to politely say no to, nice people who don't need us yelling, "Oh, my dog's not friendly." So they've been practicing. We go out the front door, and we immediately lose one dog. She just gets separated. She crosses the street. I don't know why she did that. So now she's on the other side of a 4-lane highway. My other 3 students are here. We're like, okay, don't move. Wait for the light. We'll meet you. It's like, okay. And up comes a bus. Her dog hates buzzes, because of course he does. So she walks him back down the little side, gets the dog working. Great, she's controlling distance, she's controlling the distraction, she's doing a great job. She comes back out, there's a bicyclist. And this is not great, because now we have trigger stacking, because he also hates bikes. He also hates men who have hats on, who are running at him. And now he's got a man on a bike with a full-face helmet who loves dogs. And he does this patented move, like you've got the bike, and he starts to swing off as the bike is still going so he could just go say hi to the dog, because he's God's gift to dogs. And poor Milo is about 120 pounds. His owner is built like me. And she's like, she gets the look, and she's like, and I'm like, use your words. I'm thinking, use your words, use your words, use your words. And what she yells out is, he's got rabies. Back on the bike and just keeps going. Like, well, workshop it. Come back. You got the light. She found something that would get the guy to go. Was it ideal? No. Did it work? Yes. So, use what you got. And so we practice the rest of the day, things that you can use. Your dog's adorableness is not consent from that dog to go and touch it. And if you're a reactive dog owner, you know that. If you know of people who are working really hard with their dogs, you know that. But you almost always see the people that are like, but I'm great with dogs, as you're saying, please no. And it's really hard to say no. I find in positive reinforcement dog training, no is the hardest word to say. But it's important. Because once you see stress in both species, you can't unsee it. In working with any organism, offering a way out or an alternative behavior is important in stress management. Making people feel safe and dogs feel safe, that's the most important part of our line of work, but also for the individual dog in front of you. And we're so bad at it, at reading it. This was on a website congratulating this canine handler. Everybody looks so happy. Everyone's so happy. This went out in press releases all over the country. We are so bad at reading stress in dogs. Every third email I've got over the last 5 years has been, can you train my emotional support dog not to bite me? I don't think your dog is feeling emotionally supported itself, ma'am. They are signaling that they are unhappy, and we need to listen, because once they're biting, there's very few places it can go. And that dog is under significant distress. So what did the studies say? The studies indicate that while we are generally terrible at reading our dog's stress, unless they're barking, lunging, biting, screaming, I need help, they're really good at reading us. It's kind of a one-way street. Our nonverbal existence, where our eyes glance, where our intention is going when we grab our car keys, our dogs seem to know what it is, what our intention is. Our emotional barometer, they can smell chemical and hormonal changes in us. They know if we're happy or if we're sad, often before we do. They can read us like a kid's book. In fact, that reading of us, our distress, our eustress, our homeostasis, our joy, our sadness, our glee, we're going out hunting, is what domesticated their ancestors. The ones that could read us got to stay with us and produce more puppies. The ones who didn't were often culled. The ones who could read us were given scraps of food and could sleep in our beds. One study in particular said it's unsurprising to me that the owners with high amounts of cortisol, a stress hormone, in their hair correlated with a household dog with high amounts of cortisol. But that was a one-way street. There was no evidence that anxious dogs created nervous owners. And that tracks completely with what I see in class, in many of my classes, unless the dog is in trauma. If the dog is dealing with chronic distress or a traumatic experience, those owners are very much distressed on behalf of their dog. But dogs like this, there's no correlation. That dog, she's not going to be more stressed out because her dog is stressed. No, he's a good boy. He's going to work. So it's a one-way street. They're really good at seeing us, but not so good at us reading them. So how bad are we at reading dogs? An adult took this photo. Well, that's me. I'm leaning on a dog, taking its bone, hugging it. And so my parents or whatever responsible adult was taking this photo. It's like, this is cute. It's the 70s. It's fine. I should have been bitten. Everything about this. The dog is leaning on one side. His eyes are closed. His ears are paying attention to whatever's behind him. And I'm taking his food and leaning on him. But thankfully for us, dogs are very tolerant of our stupidity, of our ignorance. This dog has no out. I'm very lucky here. All he has is teeth, and up until that, bark, lunge, and bite. But to prevent that, we have to listen to those lower levels of like lip licking and walking away and just being aware. All of these dogs are working or playing in some capacity. They work for us. They give us emotional support. They are there for us when we're having a bad day. Hopefully, we are doing the same for them. And while some stress is undoubtedly good in work and play and working for us, at some point we have to pivot from obedience above all to, is my dog actually happy? Is my dog able to work under a threshold of stress, and is that healthy and functional? Stress can be really good. It's a communication tool that we would be best to listen to. It can prime them for games and fun and activities that we like to do with them. Like just before my scent work classes, I love watching the dogs get revved up. They're sitting behind the cones. The owners are like, "You ready?" And the dog's like, "Yeah, I'm ready." Like, "Okay, go." "Yeah." And then they go. And like that's great. Like you want that. They're bouncing back. They get to go do their thing. It's anticipation. It's great. And it can be adaptive. But where we come into problems is when it's out of balance for them and also for us. And so hopefully we get them to a point where they're not completely shut down and that we can still help them, or that they're not barking and lunging and biting, and that we can help them below that threshold of stress. Now that you can hopefully see stress in dogs, you can hopefully not unsee it and be able to help the dog in front of you. And I will say, this is an example of two dogs. They are playing. Like the video of this is actually really cute. This is just one of the, I wanted to put this picture in here saying like a derpy moment in time in the grand scheme of their play behavior was actually very healthy play. But like when he took the picture, the dog's like, "Oh no," like, so like you can look at a picture in time and realize like that isn't maybe necessarily telling the whole picture, but sometimes it does, like that Home Depot photo. So see if you can figure out a consent test for your dog to see if they're cool with what's happening. Like let them take a break, see if they want to proceed. If not, if they want to walk away, let them, that's fine. And see if you can advocate for them instead of tossing them into stressful situations, even if it's with the best of intentions. Here are the resources used. Not that you guys can click on it or anything. I didn't think that through completely. And then that's me. So thanks, AWS. I hate pickles. I love whiskey, just for the record. And I have a little podcast called Bewilderbeasts. It's all about animals at humanity. And actually, one of the dogs back there, that one, Tucker, is in one of the episodes. He searches out whale poop for science, but he's aquaphobic. He's afraid of water, and he worked with marine biologists on boats to track whale poop for scientists to save orca whales. So if you can teach a dog who is terrified of water to help marine biologists do science to save whales with positive reinforcement and just being aware of the dog, you can do pretty much anything. And I wrote a book called Considerations for the City Dog, and a lot of this stuff is in it. So thank you for coming. I hope this was helpful. I'm here to answer any questions if you guys have any. And if not, go home and get a whiskey.